Welcome to the Cozy Storytime, your peaceful space to unwind and relax. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and like the video for more cozy stories every night. So, where are you watching it from? And what are you doing right now? I hope you enjoyed this story. The night settles over the rolling hills of the Shire, wrapping the land in a gentle hush. The last embers of a golden sunset fade beyond the horizon, and the small, round windows of Hobbit glow with the warmth of home. Inside the Green Dragon Inn, where laughter and stories often linger late into the evening, a tale unlike any other is about to unfold. This is a story of curiosity and mischief, of ancient secrets hidden in the depths of a brew long forgotten. It is the tale of Pippin Took, bold, restless, and ever eager for adventure, who, in his search for the perfect ale, unknowingly awakened something long lost to time. But fear not, dear listener. This is not a tale of darkness or dread. It is a story of warmth, of magic hidden in the most unexpected places, and of friendships kindled over the clinking of mugs and the hum of an old tavern song. So settle in. Let the weight of the day fade away. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and drift into the quiet comfort of a story waiting to be told. For tonight, we journey to the heart of the Shire, where the legend of the cursed ale begins. The Green Dragon Inn had always been a lively place in the heart of Hobbiton, where the air was thick with the scent of roasted meat, fresh bread, and, of course, the unmistakable aroma of ale. It was a place where hobbits gathered to share tales, celebrate small joys, and indulge in their favorite pastime, eating and drinking. The wooden beams of the old inn had seen generations of merrymaking, and tonight was no different. Except for one thing, Peregrine Took, better known as Pippin, had stumbled upon something unusual. It had begun that afternoon when Pippin, ever the curious one, had been poking around the storage room of the Green Dragon. The innkeeper, Barlyman Butterbur, had been too busy with his regulars to notice. With Mary Brandybuck standing by, Pippin rummaged through dusty barrels and forgotten shelves, his eyes glinting with mischief. "Come on, Pippin, I don't think we're supposed to be back here," Mary muttered, watching his cousin with a mix of amusement and nervousness. "Nonsense," Pippin replied, waving a hand dismissively. "Butterbur won't mind. Besides, look at all this. There's got to be something interesting." And indeed, there was. Tucked away in a creaky wooden box at the back of the storage, Pippin found an old, leather-bound book. The pages were yellowed with age, and the ink had faded, but the title was still legible: The Lost Recipes of the Shire's Finest Brewers. Mary leaned over his shoulder, peering at the book. "That looks ancient." Pippin grinned. "Exactly. That means whatever is in here is bound to be special." Carefully, he flipped through the pages, revealing a collection of ale and mead recipes, some with scribbled notes in the margins. There were mentions of long-forgotten brewing techniques, mysterious ingredients, and odd warnings about which combinations should never be attempted. Pippin's eyes sparkled as he stopped at one particular entry. The Old Took's Special Reserve. His breath caught in excitement. Everyone in the Shire had heard of the legendary ale brewed by the Old Took himself, the grandfather of Bilbo Baggins. It was said to be the finest ale ever crafted, with a flavor so rich and smooth that it could make even the grumpiest hobbit break into song. But it had been lost for generations, until now. Mary read over his shoulder, frowning slightly. It says here that the recipe was discontinued. Never to be brewed again, it says. That's a bit ominous." Pippin waved him off. "Oh, come on. That's just superstition. Maybe the old Took wanted to keep it a secret so no one else could make it." Mary remained unconvinced. Or maybe there was a reason it was never brewed again. But Pippin was already hooked. "Let's do it. Let's be the ones to bring back the greatest ale in the history of the Shire." Mary sighed but couldn't help smiling. All right. But if something goes wrong, I'm blaming you." That evening, when the green dragon was beginning to quiet down and most of the guests had already had their fill, Pippin and Mary slipped into the back room of the inn. Butterbur had gone to bed, leaving the two cousins alone with barrels of ingredients and brewing equipment. The large wooden vat stood in the center of the room, ready to hold their creation. "All right," Pippin said, rolling up his sleeves. "Let's get started." They followed the recipe carefully at first, measuring out barley, hops, and honey, stirring them into the mixture with exaggerated seriousness. Pippin read the steps aloud, and Mary executed them with careful precision, though he still shot wary glances at the book from time to time. "See?" Pippin said confidently. "Nothing to worry about." The mixture began to bubble, filling the room with a warm, malty aroma. It smelled delicious, rich, and full-bodied. Pippin and Mary exchanged a triumphant look. But then, something unexpected happened. As Pippin reached for the final ingredient, a small vial of old spices, his fingers brushed against another bottle, one covered in dust and tucked away at the back of the shelf. It was small, made of dark green glass, and had no label. Curiosity got the better of him. "Now, what's this?" he mused, holding it up to the candlelight. The liquid inside shimmered strangely, almost as if it had a life of its own. Mary frowned. "Pippin, maybe don't." But before he could finish, Pippin had already pulled the cork. A faint, eerie scent drifted into the air. It was unlike anything they had smelled before, sweet yet sharp, ancient yet oddly fresh. Without thinking too much, Pippin tipped a few drops into the mixture. The effect was immediate. The bubbling intensified, the surface of the brew churning as if something had awakened beneath it. The room grew a few degrees colder, the candlelight flickering violently. Mary took a step back. "Pippin," he said slowly, his voice tense. "What did you just do?" Pippin blinked. I just thought a little extra flavor wouldn't hurt." The brew inside the vat swirled, the once warm golden color now tinged with an odd, faint green. The scent had changed too, still rich and malty, but now carrying an underlying sharpness, something that sent a shiver down Mary's spine. A strange hush fell over the room, as if the very air had thickened. The candle flames danced wildly, throwing strange shadows on the walls. Somewhere in the inn, a chair creaked as if someone had just sat down. But there was no one else there. Mary swallowed hard. "I have a very bad feeling about this." Pippin tried to laugh, but it came out weak. "It's just a special touch. I'm sure it's fine." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure anymore. The brew continued to bubble, and for a split second, Pippin thought he saw something move within the liquid, a ripple that wasn't caused by their stirring. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the room fell still. The bubbling settled, the air warmed slightly, and the candlelight steadied. Mary let out a slow breath. Maybe it was nothing. Pippin nodded quickly. Yes. Nothing at all. They looked at the brew, then at each other. Neither spoke about what had just happened. Instead, they decided to let the ale rest and ferment as the recipe instructed. With a nervous chuckle, Pippin clapped Merry on the back. "Come on, let's get some sleep. Tomorrow, we'll have the first taste of the greatest ale in the history of the Shire." Merry hesitated but eventually nodded. "All right. But if this turns out strange, I'm going to remind you that this was your idea." Pippin grinned, though there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. As they blew out the candles and left the brewing room, neither of them noticed the faint mist that curled from the top of the vat, the same mist that had shimmered green in the candlelight. The inn grew silent, but not empty. Something had changed. Something had awakened. The following morning, the Green Dragon Inn was filled with the usual bustle of Hobbiton's early risers. The smell of fresh bread and sizzling bacon wafted from the kitchen, mingling with the familiar scent of hops and ale. Hobbits sat at wooden tables, chatting cheerfully over their breakfast, unaware that something unusual had occurred in the brewing room the night before. Pippin woke up groggily, rubbing his eyes as he stretched. The previous night's events felt like a distant dream, nothing more than a bit of excitement over an old recipe. Merry was already awake, sitting on the edge of his bed with a frown. "You were talking in your sleep," Merry said. Pippin yawned. "Was I? What did I say?" "I couldn't make out all of it, but you kept muttering something about the green mist and a voice in the dark." Pippin chuckled and waved him off. "Just a dream. Probably too much ale before bed." Merry didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue. Instead, he stood up and stretched. "Come on. Let's check on our brew." The two cousins made their way down to the back room of the inn, nodding at the other patrons as they passed. Everything seemed normal. Butterbur was busy filling mugs, a group of farmers were discussing the latest harvest, and a few younger hobbits were setting up a table for a game of dice. But the moment they pushed open the wooden door to the brewing room, the air changed. The room was colder than it should have been, a damp chill hanging in the air despite the warmth of the morning sun outside. Pippin stepped inside first, his eyes immediately going to the large vat in the center of the room. The ale had stopped bubbling, but the surface of the liquid looked strange. "What in the Shire?" Merry murmured. The brew, which had been a rich amber color the night before, now had a faint greenish hue, as though the strange ingredient Pippin had added had seeped through every part of it. The mist that had risen from it was gone, but the air still carried a lingering scent, one that was not quite right. Pippin approached cautiously, peering into the vat. The ale looked normal at a glance, but when he looked closer, he thought he saw something shift beneath the surface, like a ripple that had no cause. He shivered, though he couldn't explain why. Merry picked up the old recipe book from the table where they had left it and flipped through the pages. "Pippin, are you absolutely sure that whatever you added last night was supposed to go in here?" Pippin hesitated. "Well, no. But it smelled interesting." Merry groaned. "That's not how brewing works." "Relax," Pippin said, forcing a grin. "It's probably just an old ingredient that aged strangely. I mean, it doesn't smell bad." Merry gave him a skeptical look. "That's debatable." Pippin grabbed a wooden ladle, stirring the mixture gently. It moved smoothly, thick and rich like a proper brew. Encouraged, he lifted the ladle to his nose and sniffed. The scent was strong, malty and sweet, with just the faintest hint of something herbal. It wasn't unpleasant, exactly, but it was different. He dipped the ladle back in, filling it just enough for a taste. Mary's eyes widened. Pippin, don't. But Pippin had already taken a small sip. The taste hit his tongue in an instant. At first, it was exactly what he expected, rich and full-bodied, with the perfect balance of bitterness and sweetness. But then, something else spread across his mouth, a strange warmth, like the feeling of sitting by a fire on a cold night, but with an undercurrent of something unfamiliar. For a moment, he felt dizzy. Not in a bad way, but as though the world around him had shifted slightly, like the moment before one falls into a dream. Mary grabbed his arm. Pippin, are you all right? Pippin blinked and shook his head, clearing the sensation. I think so. He licked his lips. The taste lingered, and with it, an odd feeling, almost as if something unseen had brushed past him. Mary grabbed the ladle and stared at the liquid. That's it. We need to find out what's in this. Pippin sighed but nodded. All right. Let's look through the book again. They scoured the pages, flipping back and forth between notes and scribbled warnings. The recipe itself seemed straightforward enough, but there was no mention of any additional ingredients like the one Pippin had used. Then, near the back of the book, Mary found a section that made his breath catch. The page was old and slightly torn, the ink faded. But the words were still legible. There are certain elements that must never be introduced into the brewing process, lest one awakens what should remain asleep. Mary's stomach dropped. Pippin, read this. Pippin leaned over, reading aloud. Some ingredients, though seemingly harmless, carry remnants of things long past. Among them is the essence of the old ways, remnants of those who sought to brew not for joy, but for power. Be warned, for what they left behind still lingers. The two cousins exchanged a look. Mary flipped through the book frantically. Is there a description? A drawing? Anything that tells us what it looks like? Pippin suddenly remembered the dark green bottle. He reached into his pocket, pulling it out and holding it up to the light. The liquid inside still shimmered faintly, an eerie green glow reflecting off the glass. Mary swallowed hard. Pippin, I think we made a mistake. Pippin felt a cold shiver run down his spine. It's just a little ingredient. A few drops. But even as he said it, he wasn't so sure anymore. As if to answer him, a faint sound echoed through the room. A whisper. Both of them froze. It was distant, almost indistinguishable from the rustling of leaves outside, but it was there. A voice, low, hoarse, and ancient. It was speaking words neither of them could understand, but the tone was unmistakable. It was calling to something. Mary grabbed Pippin's arm. Tell me you heard that. Pippin nodded slowly, his mouth dry. The air around them seemed heavier. The light from the single window in the room looked dimmer, though no clouds had passed in front of the sun. The vat of ale stood motionless, silent and waiting. For the first time since their foolish experiment began, Pippin felt true unease settle in his chest. He swallowed. Maybe we should get rid of it. Mary nodded. Aye. Before anything else happens. But before they could move, the whisper came again. This time, it was closer. The eel inside the vat rippled, though neither of them had touched it. Pippin and Merry took an unconscious step back, their hearts pounding. Something wasn't right. Something was waking up. The brewing room of the Green Dragon had never felt so unwelcoming. The once cozy space, filled with the rich aroma of malt and honey, now carried an unnatural chill. The morning sunlight filtering through the small windows seemed dimmer, its warmth unable to penetrate the strange atmosphere that had settled over the room. Pippin and Merry stood frozen, staring at the vat of ale. It was still, too still. The liquid inside should have been gently shifting, reacting to the fermentation process, but instead, it sat unnaturally calm. The faint greenish tint had not faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. Then, the whisper came again. Low and distant, it curled through the air like mist, wrapping around them with an eerie familiarity. The words were unintelligible, but the feeling behind them was unmistakable. It was calling. Merry swallowed hard. Pippin, he said slowly, not taking his eyes off the vat. I don't think we should be here. Pippin's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to grin. It's just echoes, he said weakly. Old rooms make strange noises. But even as he spoke, the surface of the ale moved. A single ripple spread outward, slow and deliberate, like something beneath was shifting. Then another. Merry grabbed Pippin's sleeve. We need to leave. Now. Pippin took a step back, but just as they turned to leave, the room went silent. Utterly, completely silent. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but full, waiting. And then, a hand broke through the surface of the ale. Pale, long-fingered, slick with the thick brew, it shot upward as if gasping for air. Pippin and Merry barely had time to cry out before a second hand followed, and then, with a rush of movement, a figure pulled itself out of the vat. It rose slowly, unnaturally, as if emerging from deep water rather than a simple wooden vat. The liquid dripped from its form, pooling onto the floor. The shape was that of a man, but wrong. His body was translucent, a wavering mass of blue-green mist, shifting between solid and formless. His face was gaunt, hollow-cheeked, with eyes like dimly glowing embers set deep into dark sockets. His robes, if they could be called that, clung to his spectral form, flowing like ink dissolving in water. Pippin and Merry were too terrified to move. The figure straightened, his presence filling the room, though his feet never touched the ground. The whispering had stopped, but now a new sound filled the air, a slow, echoing breath, as though the being had taken its first gasp of air in centuries. Then, in a voice that was both deep and distant, the figure spoke. Who dares disturb my rest? Merry let out a strangled sound somewhere between a squeak and a whimper. Pippin, though shaking, managed to find his voice. I wouldn't call it disturbing, he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. More like accidental waking? The spirit's head snapped toward him, and for a moment, Pippin wished he had just kept his mouth shut. The glowing eyes studied him, unreadable, ancient. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, the figure raised one hand. It hovered over the vat, fingers splayed, as though feeling the energy of the brew. The ale is incomplete, the spirit murmured, almost to itself. Pippin blinked. Pardon? The spirit's eyes flicked back to him. The brew. It is not yet ready. Merry and Pippin exchanged a look. Of all the things the ghost could have said, curses, threats, warnings, this was not what they had expected. Merry swallowed. Who are you? The ghost seemed to straighten, shoulders squaring as if recalling some long-lost dignity. I was once known as Beringer of the North, brewer, craftsman, and master of the draughts of old. His voice, though ethereal, carried the weight of pride. My Alish were the finest in all the lands, sought by kings and warriors alike. Pippin's fear wavered, replaced by something dangerously close to excitement. You were a brewer? Beringer's expression darkened. I was betrayed. My secret stolen, my craft undone. And so I swore that none would ever taste the perfection of my work again. His gaze dropped to the ale. Yet here it is, my unfinished masterpiece. Merry, still gripping Pippin's arm, said quickly, "We didn't mean to disturb anything. We were just experimenting." Beringer tilted his head slightly. You brewed this? Pippin hesitated, then nodded. Well, sort of. We found an old recipe, and I might have added a little extra. The ghost's eyes narrowed. You meddled with forces you do not understand. Merry elbowed Pippin sharply. Told you. Beringer's spectral hand hovered over the brew again, and for a brief moment, the ale reacted, glowing faintly, swirling in slow patterns. The spirit hummed lowly, as if in thought. It is close, he murmured. So very close. Pippin, despite himself, leaned forward. Close to what? Beringer's gaze snapped back to him, and for a long moment, he simply studied the Hobbit. Then, to their surprise, he let out a dry, almost amused breath, if a ghost could sigh. To perfection. Merry gawked. Wait, so you're not here to haunt us? The spirit chuckled, a hollow sound. Perhaps I should. But no! You have stirred something long forgotten. And now, I must finish what was begun. The air in the room grew warmer, as if the spirit's anger had lessened, replaced with purpose. Beringer gestured to the vat. The brew must be completed. Pippin and Merry shared another look. This was not what they had expected at all. They had been prepared to flee, perhaps to call Gandalf if things got too ghostly. But now, standing before them, was the spirit of a legendary brewer who wanted to finish the ale. Merry hesitated. And if we help you do that? Beringer's gaze turned distant. Then my task will be done. My craft will no longer be forgotten. And I shall rest. Pippin's curiosity got the better of him. Wait, if this is supposed to be the finest ale ever made, then surely we could have a taste before you vanish? Merry groaned. Pippin. Beringer actually smiled. It was small, but there. If you prove yourselves worthy, then yes. Pippin's grin returned full force. Well then, what do we do next? Merry groaned again. I can't believe I'm agreeing to this. Beringer turned toward the ale, his hands raised as the faintest glow emanated from them. There is work to be done. The brewing room of the Green Dragon, once just another quiet corner of the Shire, had now become something else entirely. A place where history, legend, and ale intertwined. And Pippin took, for better or worse, was ready to see it through. The dim glow in the brewing room flickered as Beringer raised his translucent hands over the vat of ale. The spirit's form seemed steadier now, as though his presence in the world of the living had solidified with purpose. Pippin and Merry stood side by side, still pale from the shock of witnessing a ghost climb out of their brew, but curiosity, particularly Pippin's, was beginning to replace fear. "So," Pippin said, rocking back on his heels, "how do we make this the greatest ale in all of Middle-earth?" Merry shot him a glare. "Pip, maybe we should be more concerned about getting rid of a ghost instead of finishing his cursed recipe." Beringer let out a low chuckle, the sound like the rustling of dry leaves. "It is no curse, young ones. It is a craft, a mastery, and you have brought it closer to completion than any have in an age." He gestured to the vat. The surface of the ale rippled, glowing faintly under his spectral touch. Yet it is still incomplete. The final steps were lost when my work was undone, but I remember now. Merry swallowed hard. "And if we finish it?" Beringer turned to him, his expression unreadable. "Then my spirit will rest, and the world shall taste the perfection of my art." Pippin nodded enthusiastically. "That doesn't sound so bad." Merry groaned. "It could be bad, Pippin. What if this is some evil sorcery? What if we're making something dangerous?" Beringer's gaze darkened. "There is power in all things crafted with care. Some use it for good, some for ill. I sought only to create something true, an ale that embodied the spirit of the land, the heart of the hearth, the laughter of friends. But others, they wished to take what was mine and twist it into something lesser." The light in the room dimmed, as if the memory of betrayal still lingered even after death. Pippin frowned. "Who took it from you?" Beringer's spectral form flickered. "A rival. One who could not create as I could, but wished to claim my craft for himself. When I refused to share my secrets, he destroyed my work, burned my brewery to the ground. And so, I swore that none would drink my ale again." Merry hesitated. "But if we finish this, won't that break your vow?" The ghost was silent for a moment. Then, softly, he said, "Perhaps it is time." The air in the room felt heavier, as though history itself pressed against the walls. Pippin, despite his usual carefree nature, found himself strangely solemn. "All right then," he said. "Tell us what to do." Beringer turned back to the ale. "The final steps must be done with care. The essence of the brew is here, but it needs something more. The last ingredient, the one that binds it all." Merry's shoulders tensed. "And what is that?" Beringer extended a misty hand, pointing toward the shelves of ingredients lining the back wall of the room. "You must find the brewer's heart." Both hobbits turned slowly to stare at the cluttered shelves. "The brewer's what?" Pippin asked. Beringer's eyes glowed faintly. "A name given to an ancient ingredient. It is the spirit of the land itself, hidden in the roots of the earth, growing only in secret places. It was once common among the brewers of old, but now it is forgotten." Pippin scratched his head. "And do you happen to know what it looks like?" Beringer chuckled. "A flower. Deep gold, with petals that shimmer like the last light of dusk. It must be crushed and stirred in just before the ale is sealed." Merry let out a slow breath. "Well, that doesn't sound too terrible. We just need to find a rare, nearly extinct flower that nobody's used in centuries. Beringer turned toward them fully, his presence filling the room. You must seek it where the land remembers the old ways. In places untouched by time. Pippin's face lit up. The old forest. Merry groaned. Pippin, no! The old forest is definitely untouched by time. Pippin insisted. And I bet Tom Bombadil knows where to find it. Merry pinched the bridge of his nose. You do remember what happened last time we wandered in there, don't you? Pippin grinned. Of course. We got caught by Old Man Willow, nearly got eaten, and then Tom Bombadil saved us. But he did save us, didn't he? Which means we know someone who can help. Beringer tilted his head slightly. This Bombadil, he is a keeper of all things? Merry sighed. He's something. He knows more about the land than anyone, I suppose. Beringer nodded. Then seek him. Find the brewer's heart, and we shall finish what was begun. Pippin clapped his hands together. Right. A quest for an ancient ingredient. This is much more exciting than just a regular drink. Merry, still looking skeptical, sighed. And if we bring it back? Beringer's glowing eyes met his. Then you shall taste something no living soul has known for an age. For a moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, Merry nodded. Fine. But if we get eaten by tree roots again, I'm blaming you, Pippin. Pippin beamed. Wouldn't have it any other way. Beringer extended a hand, his form flickering like mist. Go swiftly. The brew waits for no one. As the two hobbits turned to leave, Pippin paused at the door. He glanced back at the spectral figure floating beside the vat, then grinned. You know, he said, for a ghost, you're not so bad. Beringer let out another soft chuckle, the sound distant as wind through old leaves. And for a pair of fools, you may yet surprise me. With that, Pippin and Merry hurried out of the Green Dragon, leaving behind the brewing room where something ancient had begun to stir once more. Their journey into the old forest awaited. Merry had a sinking feeling in his stomach as he and Pippin approached the edge of the old forest. The dense, tangled mass of trees loomed ahead, their gnarled branches twisted together like grasping fingers. The forest had always been strange, alive in a way that made even the bravest hobbits uneasy. It was a place of old magic, older than the Shire itself, and it did not welcome trespassers. Yet here they were, on a ghost's errand for a forgotten flower. This is a terrible idea, Merry muttered for the 100th time. Pippin, as usual, was undeterred. It's a brilliant idea. Just think about it, Merry, we find the flower, we finish the greatest ale ever brewed, and we get to be part of something truly legendary. Merry sighed. Or we get swallowed by the trees. Again. Tom Bombadil won't let that happen, Pippin said confidently. He helped us before. And besides, what's the worst that could happen? Merry gave him a flat look. You really shouldn't say things like that before stepping into the old forest. Pippin grinned and strode forward, disappearing into the tree line. With a groan, Merry followed. The moment they entered, the air changed. The warmth of the Shire vanished, replaced by a cool, damp stillness. The thick canopy overhead filtered the light, casting eerie shadows on the forest floor. The trees, ancient and brooding, stood unnervingly close together, their bark rough and cracked like weathered faces. The ground was soft with fallen leaves, muffling their footsteps as they walked deeper. Merry felt a familiar prickling at the back of his neck. The forest was watching. Pippin, for all his bravado, seemed to sense it too. He walked slower, his usual balance subdued. "So," he said in a hushed voice, "where do you think we'll find the flower?" Merry frowned. "If it's as rare as Beranger said, it won't be growing just anywhere. We need to find a place that's untouched. Somewhere old." Pippin glanced around. "Everything here is old." "Older than the rest," Merry corrected. "Somewhere the magic of the forest is strongest." Pippin brightened. "That sounds like exactly the sort of place Tom Bombadil would know about." Merry had to admit he had a point. "All right, let's call for him." Pippin cupped his hands around his mouth and took a deep breath. "Hey, Tom Bombadil, are you home?" Merry smacked him on the back of the head. "Pip, that's not how you call him." Pippin rubbed his head. "Well, do you remember his silly song?" Merry sighed and, feeling slightly foolish, began to sing. "Hey Dole, Merry Dole, ring a dong dillo. Bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow." The song had barely ended when a cheerful voice rang through the trees. "Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow. Bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow." A moment later, he stepped into view, as if the forest had simply allowed him to be there. Tom Bombadil looked exactly as they remembered. His long, curly brown beard bounced as he walked, his bright blue coat and yellow boots standing out against the muted greens and browns of the forest. His eyes twinkled with mirth, and his face held the expression of someone who had never once known fear. Well, look who's coming wandering down the forest road again," Tom said, his voice full of song even when he wasn't singing. "Little Master Merry, little Master Pippin, what brings you two back to old Tom's woods? No trees chasing you this time, I hope?" Pippin grinned. "Not yet, but we're on an adventure." Tom chuckled. "Oh, adventures, troubles, and mischief, that's Hobbit work. Come then, tell old Tom what's to be done." Merry stepped forward. "We're looking for something rare. A flower. Golden petals, shimmering like dusk light." Tom's eyebrows rose. "Ah, seeking the brewer's heart, are you?" Both hobbits stared. "You know about it?" Merry asked. Tom laughed. "Oh, old Tom knows many things. The brewer's heart is no simple flower. It grows only where time stands still, in the deepest heart of the forest. Few have seen it, fewer still have picked it." Pippin beamed. "Then you do know where we can find it?" Tom's expression grew thoughtful. I know. But the way is not easy, little friends. The forest keeps its treasures well, and not all who wander deep come back again." Merry felt a shiver run down his spine. "Is it dangerous?" Tom's smile softened. "Not for old Tom, no. But for others? It depends. The trees do not love strangers, and the paths are not always kind. But if your hearts are true, the forest may let you pass." Pippin hesitated, but only for a moment. We have to try. Mary sighed. I knew you were going to say that. Tom clapped his hands. Very well, then. Follow along, through the roots and shadows strong. Step where Tom steps, and no harm will come. With that, he turned and strode deeper into the forest, humming a tune as he went. The hobbits hurried after him, trying their best to match his light, easy steps. As they walked, the trees seemed to shift. The deeper they went, the more the world around them changed. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and old wood. The light dimmed further, and the trunks of the trees became massive, older than anything in the Shire. Mary felt a strange pull in his chest. This was a place untouched by time, where the world still whispered secrets from before the days of men. At last, Tom stopped. He pointed to a small clearing ahead, bathed in soft golden light. In the center of it, a single flower grew. It was beautiful. The petals were golden, as if spun from the last rays of a setting sun. They shimmered with a faint, unearthly glow, and the stem was a deep green, sturdy and strong. The moment the hobbits saw it, they knew this was the brewer's heart. Pippin stepped forward, but Tom held up a hand. Careful now, little one. The forest does not give its gifts lightly. Mary held his breath as Pippin knelt beside the flower. Slowly, reverently, he reached out and touched it. The moment his fingers brushed the petals, the ground trembled. A deep, groaning sound echoed through the trees, like the forest itself had woken up. The air thickened, and the golden light flickered. Pippin yelped and yanked the flower from the ground. Instantly, the trembling stopped. The air grew still again, the light steady. It was as if the forest had decided, just this once, to let them go. Tom Bombadil grinned. Well done, little hobbits. You have taken what was given, and now the work must be done. Mary let out a shaky breath. Let's get out of here before the trees change their minds. With the flowers safely in Pippin's hands, they turned and followed Tom back the way they had come, hurrying through the ancient woods with the prize that would complete Beringer's legendary ale. The journey back to the Green Dragon Inn was far less eventful than their trek into the old forest, though the weight of what they carried made the walk feel significant. Pippin held the brewer's heart carefully in his hands, as if it were a fragile treasure rather than a simple flower. Its golden petals still shimmered faintly, even under the dim evening light. Mary kept glancing back at the trees, half expecting them to close in behind them, but Tom Bombadil's guidance had been true. The forest let them leave without trouble, though neither hobbit could shake the feeling that it had only done so because it had allowed them to. Now, as they approached the warm, welcoming sight of the Green Dragon, Pippin grinned. You see, Mary? Easy as pie. Mary gave him a look. That was not easy, Pippin. We were nearly swallowed by an ancient forest for a flower. Pippin waved a hand. But we weren't swallowed. That's the important part. Mary sighed. Let's just get this over with. The Green Dragon was quiet when they entered. Most of the usual crowd had already gone home for the night, and only a few patrons lingered over their drinks. The scent of ale and roasted meat still hung thick in the air, but neither hobbit was interested in supper. Their task was not yet finished. They slipped through the back and into the brewing room, where the air was damp and filled with the scent of fermenting grains. The large vat of ale still sat in the center, its surface undisturbed. And waiting beside it, his translucent form barely visible in the dim light, was Beringer. The ghost turned as they entered. His glowing eyes flickered to the flower in Pippin's hands, and something like relief crossed his spectral face. "You have done well." Pippin grinned. "Of course we did. Now, how do we finish it?" Beringer floated closer, gazing at the golden petals with something like reverence. "The brewer's heart must be crushed, its essence released into the ale. It is the final binding. The moment it is mixed in, the brew will take on its true form." Mary hesitated. "And that won't do anything bad, right?" Beringer chuckled softly. "Nothing but perfection." That wasn't exactly the answer Mary wanted, but Pippin was already moving. He placed the flower onto a small wooden board, grabbed a pestle, and carefully ground the petals into a fine, shimmering dust. The air around them seemed to hum as the flower was broken down, the golden flecks catching the candlelight. Pippin turned to Beringer. "All right, what now?" The ghost gestured toward the vat. "Stir the ale and slowly add the dust. Let it be absorbed fully." Pippin nodded, then grabbed a long wooden paddle. He climbed up onto a small stool and began stirring the vat in slow, deliberate circles. The deep brown liquid swirled smoothly, its scent rich and inviting. Mary took a deep breath, then carefully sprinkled the golden dust into the ale. The moment the first flecks touched the liquid, the entire vat shuddered. Pippin froze. "Oh, Mary?" The ale glowed. A deep, warm light spread through the liquid, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. The scent in the air changed, deepening into something almost impossible to describe, a perfect blend of spice, malt, and something entirely unique, something ancient. Beringer watched with satisfaction. Yes. It is waking." The light swirled within the brew, fading and brightening in slow waves. The entire room felt different, as though the very air around them had thickened with something powerful. Mary swallowed hard. "Pippin, are we sure we should be drinking this?" Pippin, however, was mesmerized. "We have to try it." Beringer turned to them. "The ale must rest for one night. By dawn, it will be complete." Mary exhaled in relief. "Good. That gives us time to make sure we don't wake up with extra toes or something." Pippin rolled his eyes. "You worry too much." The two hobbits stepped away from the vat, watching as the glow slowly faded, leaving behind what looked like a perfectly ordinary ale. But they knew better. Something old and powerful had settled into that brew, something no living soul had tasted for generations. Beringer inclined his head. "You have done what no other has. The craft is complete." Mary hesitated. "And you? Will you?" Beringer's form flickered slightly. "My purpose nears its end. When the ale is drunk, my oath will be fulfilled." Pippin frowned. "Wait, so you'll just disappear?" Beringer smiled faintly. "All things must rest in their time, little one." Pippin's face fell slightly, but before he could say anything else, Beringer raised a hand. "Go. Sleep. Tomorrow, the green dragon will taste a brew unlike any other." The two hobbits exchanged a glance, then nodded. Though curiosity burned in them both, they knew better than to rush it now. As they left the brewing room and headed upstairs to their beds, the green dragon felt strangely silent. The world itself seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for morning. And beneath it all, the ale in the vat pulsed with a slow, steady light, as if dreaming of the moment it would finally be tasted. Dawn broke over Hobbiton in a soft golden glow, painting the rolling hills in warm hues of orange and pink. A thin mist still clung to the grass, but the village was already stirring. The scent of fresh bread drifted from the baker's shop, and the occasional clang of a blacksmith's hammer echoed through the air. Inside the Green Dragon Inn, however, all was still. Pippin was the first to wake, stretching with a wide yawn before jolting upright. His heart raced with excitement as he remembered what lay waiting below. The ale. He jumped out of bed, practically vibrating with energy as he shook Mary awake. "Mary, wake up. It's time." Mary groaned, pulling his blanket over his head. "It's too early for your nonsense, Pip." Pippin yanked the blanket off. "It's never too early for legendary ale." Mary sat up with a scowl, rubbing his eyes. "I swear, if this stuff turns us into newts or ghosts, I'm blaming you." Pippin just grinned. "Come on." The two hobbits dressed quickly and hurried downstairs, their feet light on the wooden steps. The common limb of the Green Dragon was empty, save for a few sleepy barmaids preparing for the day. The scent of the previous night's revelry still lingered in the air, wood smoke, old ale, and laughter that had settled into the walls over years of good company. As they slipped through the back door and into the brewing room, they found Beringer waiting. The ghost was more translucent than before, his form flickering slightly in the dim light. "It is time." Pippin's eyes shone with excitement as he approached the gray brewing vat. The ale inside looked perfectly normal now, deep amber in color, rich and smooth. But the scent in the air told a different story. Mary inhaled and his eyebrows lifted. "That smells incredible." It was unlike any ale he had ever known. The scent was deep and full, rich with malt and honey, but layered with something else, something old, something powerful. Pippin licked his lips. "I can't wait any longer." He grabbed 2 mugs from the shelf and dipped one into the vat, filling it to the brim with the shimmering amber liquid. The light from the morning sun caught on the surface, making it glow faintly for just a moment. He handed the first mug to Mary, then filled his own. Mary stared at the ale. "Are we sure this is safe?" Beringer's voice was steady. "This is the finest brew ever made, perfected over 100 years. It is not just ale, it is craft, history, and magic, bound together." Pippin grinned. "Well, that's good enough for me." Without another word, he raised the mug to his lips and took a deep swallow. The moment the ale touched his tongue, his eyes widened. The taste was beyond anything he had ever imagined. It was warm, smooth, and full-bodied, but there was something else, something almost alive. The flavor danced over his tongue, shifting between honeyed sweetness, deep spice, and a crisp finish that left his entire body tingling. He let out a contented sigh. "Mary, this is it. This is the greatest ale in the history of Alish." Mary hesitated for only a moment before taking a cautious sip. And then, just like Pippin, his eyes went wide. By the stars. The ale was perfect. It was beyond perfect. Each sip was a new experience, as if the brew was shifting to match whatever flavor he most desired in that moment. It was deep and complex, but impossibly smooth, refreshing yet rich, like drinking the very essence of the earth's finest ingredients. Pippin laughed, his entire body buzzing with warmth. I could drink this forever. Mary took another long sip, then let out a slow exhale. I think I finally understand why Beringer refused to let this recipe be lost. Pippin turned to the ghost, his face alight with joy. You've done it, Beringer. Your ale is complete. Beringer's expression was one of quiet satisfaction. At long last. And then, as if responding to his words, a soft wind stirred through the brewing room. The light caught on the dust in the air, and Beringer's form shimmered. Pippin's smile faltered. Wait, what's happening? The ghost's glow softened, his edges fading like mist under the morning sun. My purpose is fulfilled. I am no longer bound to this world. Mary felt a pang in his chest. So, this is goodbye? Beringer gave a small, wistful smile. All things must find their end, even the finest brew. But know this, little ones, you have restored something lost. And so long as this ale is shared, a piece of me will always remain. Pippin's throat tightened. He had grown fond of the ghostly brewer, despite the mischief and the trouble. I wish we could share a drink together. Beringer's eyes glowed softly. You already have. With those final words, his form dissolved into the golden light, fading like the last embers of a fire. For a long moment, silence filled the brewing room. The air still held the scent of the legendary ale, but the space felt just a little emptier. Pippin stared at the spot where Beringer had been. I'm going to miss him. Mary sighed, taking another sip. Me too. Then, as if the world had been waiting, the green dragon's door burst open. Samwise Gamgee stood in the doorway, hands on his hips, looking at the two of them with suspicion. All right. What exactly have you two been up to? Pippin and Mary exchanged glances before Pippin grinned. Sam, my dear friend, have we got something for you? He grabbed an extra mug, filled it to the brim, and handed it to Sam. Drink this. And then we'll tell you everything. Sam hesitated but took the mug, sniffed the ale, then shrugged. Well, if I'm gonna hear one of your mad stories, might as well have a drink first. And with that, he took a deep gulp. The moment the ale hit his tongue, his eyes widened just as Pippin's and Mary's had. He looked down at the mug, then back at them. What is this? Mary chuckled. The best ale in the history of Middle-earth. Pippin leaned against the table, grinning ear to ear. And Sam, it's only the beginning. As the first few rays of true morning light filled the room, the three hobbits lifted their mugs in a quiet toast to Beringer, to adventure, and to the finest ale ever brewed. The Green Dragon had never seen a day quite like this. Word of Pippin and Mary's mysterious new ale spread like wildfire through Hobbiton. It began with Samwise, who had taken one long sip before declaring, with great reverence, that it was the best thing he had ever tasted. Then, despite all of Mary's warnings to keep things quiet at first, Pippin had rushed out the door, proclaiming to everyone within earshot that they had just made the greatest ale in all of Middle-earth. Within an hour, hobbits from every corner of the Shire were making their way to the Green Dragon, eager to see what all the fuss was about. By midday, the common room was packed. The air buzzed with conversation and the clinking of mugs as the mysterious new brew was poured, tested, and promptly adored by all who tried it. "It's got the smoothness of an autumn morning," said one hobbit. "No, it's more like a warm summer evening," argued another. "I swear, it tastes like my granddad's old honey cakes," said a third, smacking his lips. Each drinker seemed to experience something slightly different, flavors that shifted and adapted, evoking memories of simpler times, of warmth and home. It was more than just a drink. It was a feeling. Pippin and Merry, seated near the bar, watched the unfolding spectacle with immense satisfaction. "We did it, Merry," Pippin said, beaming as he sipped his own mug. "We actually did it." Merry, for once, didn't argue. He simply nodded, watching the joy spread across the room like a wildfire. We did." But even in the celebration, there was something wistful in his eyes. He turned his gaze toward the back of the inn, toward the brewing room where Beringer had once stood. For a moment, he almost expected to see the ghost watching them, offering a small nod of approval. But Beringer was gone. The thought made Merry's chest feel tight. Their spectral brewer had finally found peace, but part of him wished he could still be here to see this moment, to watch his life's greatest work finally reach the world. Pippin must have sensed his thoughts, because he clapped a hand on Merry's shoulder. "He'd be proud, you know." Merry nodded. "Yeah, I think so too." At that moment, Sam appeared beside them, looking slightly overwhelmed. "This is getting out of hand," he said, motioning toward the growing crowd. "Folk are coming from Bywater and beyond just to try this stuff. If you two aren't careful, you'll have half the Shire camping outside the inn by nightfall." Pippin chuckled. "I don't see a problem with that." Sam snorted. "You wouldn't." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "But I do have a question. Where exactly did this elf come from?" Merry and Pippin exchanged a glance. "Well," Pippin said, scratching his chin, "it's a bit of a long story." Sam sighed. "I had a feeling you'd say that." Before they could launch into their tale, the door to the inn swung open again, and a hush fell over the room. In the doorway stood none other than Frodo Baggins, recently returned from a visit to Buckland. He carried himself with his usual quiet grace, though there was a clear curiosity in his blue eyes as he surveyed the crowd. "What in Middle-earth is going on here?" he asked, stepping inside. "Frodo!" Pippin leapt up, waving him over. "You've got to try this." Frodo gave him a wary look. "What is it?" "The finest ale ever brewed," Merry said simply. Frodo raised an eyebrow but allowed Pippin to thrust a full mug into his hands. He examined the amber liquid, then took a careful sip. The moment the ale touched his tongue, he stopped. His expression shifted, not just to pleasure, but to something deeper. Something almost haunted. He lowered the mug slowly, eyes distant. "This," he looked at them both, voice soft. "This tastes like home." Merry and Pippin exchanged a knowing smile. "It's supposed to," Merry said. Frodo took another sip, slower this time. "Where did you find this recipe?" "That," Pippin said, leaning back with a grin, "is a secret." Frodo gave them a long look, but he didn't press further. Instead, he just lifted his mug in a silent toast before taking another drink. The rest of the afternoon passed in a golden haze of laughter and storytelling. The Green Dragon had never been livelier, filled with warmth, music, and the sound of clinking mugs. As evening settled in, Pippin found himself leaning against the bar, staring out at the revelry. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had truly done something. Merry nudged him. "So, what now?" Pippin considered the question. "Well," he said at last, "I suppose we keep brewing." Merry smirked. "And what happens when the Shire drinks us dry?" Pippin grinned. "Then we make more." A chuckle escaped Merry's lips. "That's an answer I can agree with." And so, beneath the warm glow of the lanterns, amidst the laughter of friends and the clinking of mugs, the legend of Beringer's brew was born. From that night on, the Green Dragon Inn became known far and wide as the home of the most remarkable ale in all the Shire, an ale so fine, so rich with warmth and memory, that those who drank it swore they could taste something ancient in its depths. And though Beringer himself had long since faded into the beyond, his craft remained, living on in every golden drop. For as long as hobbits had a thirst for good drink, the cursed ale of the Green Dragon, no longer cursed, but blessed, would never be forgotten. And Pippin, ever the mischief maker, ever the dreamer, would never stop brewing. The fire burns low, casting flickering shadows against the warm wooden walls of the Green Dragon Inn. The night has settled deep over the Shire, the world outside hushed beneath a blanket of stars. The echoes of laughter and clinking mugs have faded, replaced by the gentle creak of the inn's beams and the soft breath of slumbering hearths. And so, the tale comes to an end, not with great battles or distant journeys, but with the quiet satisfaction of a story well told. The cursed ale, once lost to time, now lives on in every drop poured, in every shared moment between friends, in the warmth that lingers long after the last sip is taken. Perhaps that is the true magic of the brew, not just its taste, but the way it brings hearts together, the way it turns simple evenings into memories that last a lifetime. So now, dear listener, let the weight of the day slip away. Let the stillness of the night wrap around you like a familiar embrace. Close your eyes, breathe deep, and drift into quiet dreams where the fires of the Green Dragon still glow, where laughter still lingers, and where, just maybe, the spirit of an old brewer watches over the merriment with a knowing smile. Rest well. The story will be waiting when you wake.